Hey there, let's talk about episode 4 of the Vampire Lestat. Spoilers are ahead. So this week we are on the road. It's called the Devil's Road episode. Does that mean we're done with the concert tour? Is that what's going on? I don't know. Actually, if you look up on the Wikipedia, the next episode's called New York and the next one's called Montreal. So we're going to get back onto the show. But I don't know. We'll get to it. But it looks like they might be going to the studio too. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe the tour is over. But we'll get to it. But it starts off on the road. Fun times. This episode's pretty fun, huh? I think it's like maybe one of the fun episodes. I mean, it's fun in a kind of Mean Girl kind of way, especially when we get to the actual concert moment. By the way, we get another trans character here. We got the scar here. You can see. So some more trans inclusion. That's cool. Last time we had the trans vampire episode 1. We'll be seeing more gender fluidity. What about Gabrielle's gender fluidity? I haven't read that far into the books, but from what I'm aware of, Gabriella, in this version, likes to dress more mask, and I think she in the books identifies as a male at some point or something, or at least poses as a man in order to gain benefits, particularly back in ancient times, in the 1700s 1800s, when it was that based. But in this adaptation so far, she has been presented kind of like a modern woman. I think she hasn't really been shown to experiment with her gender identity, and I wonder if that's going to happen later. There might be a clue that could happen in the end of the episode. But anyways, it starts off with a really fun scene with the cop showing up, and then Lestat showing off his vampire powers. We know that his powers are he's able to control people. In the we saw that in the first season, right? He controlled a whole group of army boys to come to the townhouse and then leave. So I guess he could do this, right? Yeah, this is something part of his power. We don't see him do this that much, though. I feel like maybe we could have seen more of him doing stuff like this. But I don't know. But this is fun. It's like a fun moment. And everyone was, we've seen scenes like this, right? Of like party rockers, like getting rid of their drugs, before the cops raid. But there's a fun vampire spin to it, and the tension is high. But then realize that it's no need to be tense because we got the vampire here. So it looks like everyone's enjoying the vampire now as their band leader. But it's always fun to put cocaine on cops' faces, So I love this scene. And then we got the intro again. Always fun to see that. This episode is a fun time, but we do get a little bit of some somberness with Louis. Of course, we're keeping moments with Louis in this season to keep, and now Claudia's representation as well, to keep some synergy with the previous seasons, because of course this is all stuff we don't really see in the books, I imagine, right? But it's interesting. It continues from what we saw last time, when Louis, after him killing Bruce, he wants to connect with this waitress person who it looks similar to Claudia, and it works okay. I want to see where it goes. It kind of feels maybe a little bit superfluous at this point to have this moment here. It's like just to include Louis as a character. I in this season, I feel like they may be dragging this out a little bit too much, and it kind of feels like they just did it for the sake of keeping the actors still in the season, like I said. But we'll see where it ends up. But of course, the part of the bus scenes are always fun, and what I like about the chaoticness of this all is like, if this feels like authentic and real, like how characters like talk over each other, like the overlapping dialogue and all that. and just feels very natural, which I like. Um, Another weird thing is we've seen them shower in this room, but apparently there's also a toilet in here. So, um, I guess vampires don't mind using the bathroom for everybody to see. Although I imagine, do vampires shit in this universe? Like they pee for sure, but I don't think they shit. So I guess it doesn't matter to them. But he tells the camera guy not to take a shit, or he'll die, and so he's like holding it in this whole time, which is, I imagine, very uncomfortable. So that's weird. And so he's talking to his mother, fledgling, because she left him again because she likes to go away, while Daniel's trying to continue the interview here. And we get flashbacks, to the previous times. This is like right after she becomes his fledgling, and it's also after is this after they this is after that last episode where Nikki became a vampire. Then he ended up dying, right? They killed him. Armand put him in the fire, and so they're all happy now. They're leaving France. Oh yeah, I think he mentions that like he left the vampire theater to Armand, and so that's kind of like some of the stuff we saw last season. And then they're going off to their adventure, and the mother son dynamic is building here. I feel like this episode kind of, especially by the ending sequence here at the beach, really solidifies like what the relationship is all about, really. I feel like, which we'll get to in a second or in a bit. So Larry's back. He's done with his he's done with his I mean, he's still part of the alcohol anonymous thing. He's doing his steps, I think, right? Which that's where he met Armand. I was suspecting we were going to see a scene between him and Armand, and he later mentions that he has a sponsor. So here's where Armand shows up, and he doesn't quite explain himself too much, like why he's decided to come back. But I guess everyone just expected him to like take a break and come back, But he's like, but he seems to be focused now on his sobriety, because I feel like maybe that one of the reasons he left is because like all this vampire excess and debauchery would lead him to a bad path. So that's why everyone expected probably him to leave, to like kind of focus and lock in on his sobriety or something. I don't know. And now he's ready to go on tour with the vampire and not be tempted or something. And so we get the bowling scene here with Daniel, super great at bowling. Vampires are great at bowlers, because they got those powers. But then here we get Armand returning to apologize to Daniel. And we get also a mention earlier in the bus that, and here confirmation that Armand created Daniel on a plane. So like we never quite knew what happened, how last season Daniel became a vampire. Like we knew that Armand was the sire, but we didn't know quite when it happened. I was like I assumed it happened like in that scene, in the scene where we saw Armand get thrown against the wall by Louis, like almost right away or something, like when Louis left, and he was like, Armand, you better, when I come back, you better not be here. Like I imagined like around that time. I don't know, I just suspected that, but I guess it doesn't, it doesn't mean that it had to be that moment. But here we get the confirmation that he was on a plane, because Dr. Farid said something about his that's how he learned when his mother died. It was a whole thing earlier. So he got bit on the plane, and like you know, the kind of jab Lestat was getting at against Daniel was that like, oh, like you were on your way to not even to see your family, you're on your way to get the book published, you know, see your publisher or something. I don't know. So like, why on the plane? Like, why? Like, are we gonna get any clarification? Like, did he sneak onto the plane? Like, would Daniel have gotten onto the plane if Armand was there? Either way, Armand is trying to apologize. He's doing one of his steps, you know. And so this is kind of like indicating that Armand is actually perhaps sincere about participating in that Alcoholics Anonymous addiction program. I mean, it's not. It's, you know, the steps is always referencing Alcoholics Anonymous, but they probably have different stuff for not just alcohol, right? It's probably just a generic addiction version. And so in his addiction is what love. It could, you know, it's probably, you know, it's probably blood, you know. And so he was maybe. And that's one of the reasons. Well, the main reason he bit Daniel was to spite Louis, I guess, and to maintain Daniel around forever to remind Louis of his time with Armand, because they're all connected ever since, you know, we saw that in last season, the incident in San Francisco. So, you know, but he did it at a spite, and so he feels a little guilty about that now, of course. And of course, Daniel's like, "Oh, you're doing the steps. I tried that. That's some bullshit." And he basically, you know, calls him a wuss, whatever. It's like you're Armand. Sorry for killing you on the private jet. Sorry about all these things. Dubai, San Francisco. But like, you know, we could maybe suspect also that maybe Armand is also continuing, or is also withholding some truth here, and maybe is doing some manipulation here, like people were suspecting, and was somewhat true from last season. But I feel like he pretty sincerely wants to get better, you know. And I don't think he's like, because last episode I was thinking like he went into that addiction group just to get to befriend Larry, so he can get in with the band, you know, and get back at Lestat somehow, manipulate his way in there. But I think that's partly it. But I think it's also he wants to apologize, and he wants to get some respect again from Lestat and from everybody, Daniel, from Louis as well. Yeah, because he seems to be like all lonely now, right? You know, yeah, everyone rejects him. You know, he's like he fucked up his life by all these decisions he made, and everyone, you know, he's estranged from everybody. So so I feel like he's sincere about it, you know. And we'll get more into that in another scene. We get more scenes of this, you know, and not much to say about these scenes except how much is he tipping her? It says 500 at some point. I saw it says later she confirms the price of what it'll take to get her away from her job here. But it looked like it was 500 here, like at least 500, but probably 5,000. Because Louis is fucking rich. I guess it doesn't matter too much what we saw here.
Watch the vampire.
Oops, now we skipped over there. Now I gotta skip back over here. I pressed the wrong button. So I don't know, it doesn't matter. So, you know, okay, there it is, 50. You know, at least 500, but he could be writing some more here. Anyways, but it seems like, you know, a life-changing thing would be, you know, 500,000, you know, and that's, I think, is what you ask at the end. So he's explaining he's having trouble really articulating why he's infatuated with her, or in the sense of mesmerized by her because of she looks like Claudia. I mean, she assumes he's some kind of weird stalker and stuff, but she's gonna probably read the book now, right? She ends up reading the book. Yeah, he mentions the book, the interview, the vampire book. And then we go back to this. I guess like is the writers like consciously connecting the relationship between the differences between Louis and Claudia's versus Gabrielle and Lestat. This one's kind of like more of a wholesome, some like pretty kind of toxic because he's stalking her, but it feels like they're gonna become better acquainted and better friends or something after this, but then after this episode and then these two, it's becoming even more toxic and more toxic as we go along. And it is an interesting scene here. We do have some subtitles at last. One of the criticisms I had for the previous episodes is that they should have just kept with subtitles, like her accent isn't that great. And I think especially in these older scenes, it just makes more sense for them to be talking in their native language. And then we have subtitles, like this guy has subtitles. And it's interesting, we see her, this might be the first time she uses her telepathic powers to communicate. And that really spooks this guy, of course. He's like, oh shit. She is the same person. She's a fucking vampire ghost or something. But Lestat's turned on by that, and then we'll see what happens with that later. We're introduced to a new character here. I wonder if he's going to be that big of a deal or not. He's like part of a record label executive or something. So he's probably going to be the guy who's ahead of making the next album, the Failures or whatever they're going to call it, because we do get a peek at them at the studio later. And here's Larry is explaining, telling him, his brother, about how, I got a sponsor now, and he doesn't name Armand, and he's like, I got to keep that a secret. He says something like that. I can't quite say that. And he refers to him as a god, which is, does Armand present himself that way to him? I mean, he's a vampire, and I imagine if he calls him a god, then he probably revealed to Larry that he's a vampire, and therefore that's why he's keeping that a secret. But to keep it a secret and tell Larry to, like, hey, don't tell anybody, that also like reeks of a little bit of some conspiracy manipulation going on here on Armand's side, so we'll see where that's headed. It seems to be like Larry's going to be a sort of a spy for Armand or something. And then we get this moment here. Oh yeah, so Gabrielle is still missing in action. He's seeing his ghosts again. He's seeing his muses. And what is Daniel asking here about? He's just pestering him about stuff. They're arguing about Armand. Oh yeah, because Armand was supposedly was play acting the whole interview last season, and he actually could supposedly read Daniel's mind, and Armand was telling Daniel, like, oh, I wasn't reading your mind because I was preoccupied with Louis. He's right next to me, and I love Louis, and so I couldn't read your mind. So I wasn't like playing along with your interview. It was actually genuine, my answers to the interview and all that. But that confused Daniel. He's like, oh, maybe Armand, was the big manipulator all along. And we'll get to that in a second. But he goes back to his memory of his mother, walking in on her betting this Jesus guy who was carrying a Jesus cross. A little bit of showcasing a little bit of the irony there of a religious person betting out of wedlock, allured by the devil herself. And that upsets Lestat because Lestat has weird mommy issues as we've seen. He could hear them from outside. That was also an interesting moment from the earlier scene that they could hear the heartbeats, and they were counting the heartbeats. That was a cool little thing, little vampire trick. How many heartbeats are in the room? Can you tell yet? And Lestat, of course, is as the sire, is better at this point, But I guess at this point, Gabrielle is probably pretty similar in abilities. I don't know. We'll see. So what was interesting about this scene is the climax. That's some vampire climax right there. Getting some blood on your face at peak pleasure time. The bloody shot. So that's vampire sex. Not so good for the one on top there, but really she's the top, obviously. Anyway, so and then he goes and fucks his mom, as vampires do. We're gonna get into a little bit more of this at the beach scene, but it's monstrous because that's what vampires are. They're monsters. Remember, you can't forget that, So Armand shows up. He's showing up to everybody. I imagine he's going to show up and say hello to Louis as well, maybe next episode. But he had part of his 12-step program. He's got to go and apologize to all the people he's done wrong. And Lestat's Lestat, and decides to shower in blood in front of him, which is funny because the way it's a catty way of listening to his apology of Armand here, and also like it's just the funny visual as it relates also to what he's saying. And there's a point there. Yeah, he says, while sharing your body and blood, and that's exactly what he's seeing here. He's sharing his body and the blood here. And then he says, like, endowment, when he says, your exit from Paris and beyond, generous endowment. Endowment, of course, the money he left behind to fund the Paris Theater of Vampires. And Armand then looks at the nicely endowed, generously endowed body of Lestat. So fun little moments like that. But this is definitely our shower scene of the episode. We've seen, we even saw Daniel shower a little for a second earlier on, but like he's the main character in the shower this season, this episode, Lestat, as I suspected early on, right? I was like, there's probably going to be a person showering in every episode. They have the shower in this bus. They're going to have to show someone showering in every episode. And this week we got Lestat, and probably the best shower scene of the season so far. Wouldn't you agree, Armand? Don't you agree? But this is a great dynamic here, and vicious dynamic. He's like, yeah, I don't care about your apology at all. Go. He calls him like a death cloud. Was he called? He even says that he didn't like tell Louis right away about the fact that he's the one who rescued him, not Armand. In order to torture Armand, that was all tortured, years and decades of torture. For Armand, and because he knew that would get at him, and he calls him like this cloud, and so he's like, get out of here, and when you show up, I know my good times are over pretty much, because when you show up, everything goes to shit. So, can you please leave and get us fuck cloud? He calls him, because you're a fuck cloud, Armand. And get away from here or kill yourself. Like, damn, pretty harsh, But that's the vampire way, the Vampire Lestat way, compared to, I guess, Armand. But Armand's main secondary reason to be here really is to tell him to stop playing music, because it's gonna attract more vampires. It's like, he later tells Daniel, like, he's going to be this leader of this new convergence, the new vampire conversion moment, where now there's more vampires. Like, he feels like, and they're going to take over the world, and it's going to create all this chaos and murder and death and stuff. And Armand's a good guy, right? So, he has his ways, Armand, his tricky ways. But I think at the end of the day, Armand is more of a maybe neutral good character, versus Lestat is more sometimes chaotic neutral, I guess. Definitely chaotic. Some might say, even in the book, like from what I read, like, in the first book, he's more chaotic evil, and then he becomes more chaotic good some points. But in this, I feel he's more chaotic neutral in this show. And even in a passage I read recently, a few chapters in the book, Armand comes and visits or shows up at this ball where Lestat's at sometime after the start of the Vampire Theater, and like, Lestat beats Armand up. Like, he's pretty vicious. Like, it's like kind of the similar scene to the scene we saw in the show from last season 1, where he beats up Louis, and then a different version where Louis beats up Lestat in season 2. But and so he does have like these evil tendencies in the book as well, even though he supposedly kills only people who deserve it. But it's the monstrous brutality of the vampire, I guess, is showcased there. But anyways, so in here, he's like being more just like a mean girl, as it's coming up here at the show. It's like, hey, you should come to my show while you're here. Back to the diner. I almost feel like maybe it might be better. Like, I get going back and forth, but it might be better just to have less of a scattering of these scenes and just have 1 or 2 scenes of Louis with Claudia, and then not go back and forth so much. I don't know. Maybe it'd be better. But I get the intention of trying to balance, not have too much Lestat all the time throughout. So then we get to the show. This is a fun show, probably the most fun we've had so far on the tour here. We get a nice pigtail hairdo here, reminiscent of the older Lestat, or when he was younger. Sorry, the younger Lestat from the olden times. And very fun stuff. He's reminding people about the books, like, hey, did you read this book? And then he's like, guess what? Armand, the very one, is in the crowd right here. And the whole show here is pretty much to mock Armand, with this new song they made that like make fun of him as the big boss, who like, he's the one who tells people when to die, like who he decides who can die, who cannot, and all about following the vampire rules, And so just making fun of him and mocking him in front of the whole crowd here is just vicious Lestat here. Armand can't quite say anything. He has no comeback. He has no mic, of course. If this was a parody, maybe he would be given a mic and they would do a battle here on stage. But that was like That was a fun time, fun little song, you know. Hey, big boss, and it cuts away at the end there, of course. I wonder if we'll get extended scenes. You know, we're getting you can listen apparently to if they remind you every time the show ends. Listen to the whole music from the Vampire Lestat on Spotify or whatever. I don't know where, and I don't really want to do that because I don't want to spoil myself by listening to the music ahead of time. I want to like experience it for the first time on the show, because like listening to this song like not with the visuals, I think just wouldn't work as well. You know, it's all about the context of the show. Like that's where it works better. Some of these, because I think some of the songs are like are good or fine, you know, but I think they work better within the visuals of it, and like not so much just listening to them. I don't know, maybe it depends. But I think last episodes had the best songs maybe. But we'll see. But I'm liking how each episode has a new song. That's cool. I want to keep seeing that. And so fun time. Let's start here. Mean boy vampire, and then we get a scene here with Daniel following Armand, and we get some clarification on what is going on between them. Why there's somewhat of clarification, like why this time stops and everyone disappears, and it's like something that happens to Armand too, and he says it's the vampire bond that they have. So I guess like each sire and fledgling have a certain bond that is different, you know, for everyone has every bond is different from each other from every other one. And this is how their connection manifests, you know, when they're around each other, I guess, or when they make a connection. As Daniel has said in the past, this thing happens where time freezes, or like no one's around, and he can't really explain it, Armand. He just says this is what it is. I don't know. I'm not sure, you know. And it's kind of funny how is Armand like the oldest of the vampires in this show? I feel like he is oldest, you know. You would think he would have more answers, but he doesn't. And there's also something else here. He says he doesn't see he okay, so this is where Daniel's like asking like, were you reading my mind? Were you like pretending that you during the whole interview last time? And he's like, no, Lestat's lying. I really wasn't reading your mind, and it was, you know, because of Louis. But then he's like, no, it was because of love, which is a bit interesting here, ambiguous.
Daniel.
It wasn't my love. He says it wasn't my love for Louis that kept him distracted from reading Daniel's mind and trying to manipulate the interview. But he says it was love. And then he looks at Daniel, and then Daniel looks at him and is like, wait, what? Is he saying that he loves Daniel? Is that what's going on here? Or is there something else? His love for humanity? I think in the books, from what I've read, Lestat has this love affair with humanity in a way. Like he loves like in like a cute way, how maybe humans love animals or dogs or something. I feel like that's how Lestat loves humans. And is maybe, but yeah, that's not really articulated in this adaptation so far. It's the opposite of that, really. But then maybe in the series, Armand's the one who loves humans, because like we didn't really get any indication that he's in love with Daniel, you know. So I feel like maybe that's what they're alluding to. That love, like the love for Daniel's humanity, is what kept him from invading his mind and exploiting him, you know. So maybe that's what's going on here. I don't know, that's interesting. And then some more fun scenes. We get more ghost muses from Lestat here, Nikki here, smearing blood all over the wall there. I mean the mirror, and then Lestat doing leaving a voicemail for Gabriela. Like, guess what? I'm super popular, and there he goes with his popular walk. Also, you know, mean vampires. Mean vampire walk. Look at that. And so they go back to the. Oh yeah, they get the shot. The assassination scene. So this is where things go to shit for this episode, right? For a second. This is his peak popularity. The video of him of his floating on stage we saw earlier in the episode, it has gone viral. He's got fans everywhere. He's at the height, and then his biggest fan shoots him. But what's interesting here is that, unlike, in reality, in this world here where the vampires exist, he's like, he did it to show people like, hey, he's an actual real vampire. I'm not shooting my vampire favorite rock star to kill him because I think he's a phony or something. No, he shoots him because he wants to show the world, like, I believe that he's a vampire. I love him. I love this guy, and I love that he's a vampire. But also, I think maybe also he's concerned about. He has this manifesto that we get into in a second. He's concerned about this vampire thing, and like maybe he's becoming resentful. Actually, never mind. I think he's become resentful of the fact that these vampires are siphoning off the fans, and he's not getting anything out of it. So we'll get into it in a second. He shoots them to show, like, hey, look, he's not gonna die. He's a vampire, to prove that he's a vampire. But he gets scuttled away. Accidentally shoots the lawyer as well, but it looks like she survives. It was just a nick in the shoulder, maybe. She's hurting here, but it looks like she's alive and good, and the doctor's there, of course. While his wounds are slowly healing here. You can actually see it. You can see it slowly healing here. If you look at here, for example, it's gonna be a smaller. Now it's closing up, and now it's pretty much closed. So that's interesting. And that is reminding him of his mother, as everything does. So here's the beach scene, and what's interesting about this scene is that Gabriella is like wondering, okay, so we've been vampires for a while now, but what is it going to be like in 10 years? What is it going to be like in 100 years? And Lestat's more optimistic. He's like, oh, like, bro, probably people flying around in balloons and stuff, and air balloons, and it's an endless, infinite, savage garden, when we can do as we please. While Gabriella is like, we should probably rule, we have all these powers. We're the devils, and and she's kind of like embracing the evilness, the monstrousness of vampire life, and she yearns for more, besides leisurely decadent life. She wants, like, to feel more powerful and maybe get some of that respect that she, or perhaps fear that she couldn't get when she was human. Because, like, her whole character arc, really, as we saw in the first couple episodes, is that she was the outcast of the family along with Lestat, but because she was a woman, she couldn't find that respect, and she felt like she deserved more, right? And she couldn't get that. And so as a vampire now, she's like embracing her power now, and that's how she feels like that's her purpose in life now. It's like, oh, like I can actually fulfill my desires that I've always wanted to, but I couldn't when I was a meager, human. and so she kind of like completely embraces that evil now, and that's kind of now I'm with this scene here and this dialogue here. I'm kind of better understanding her motivations and her character, and also part of why she's like I also kind of egotistic about herself, but also like sees herself in her son, and that's why she kind of like is romantic with him and all that, and intimate with him. That's part of it as well, but also because it's monstrous. It's part of embracing the evilness of it all. It's like, I'm gonna, she's gonna kill, she's gonna slaughter, she's gonna fuck her son. Like, it's all part of the same vampire monster aesthetic she's for, and so that, and then Lestat, of course, it has that loneliness, and Nikki didn't work out, Armand didn't work out, but a constant that he can rely on, at least for the time being, is his mother. And so I think that's why he falls for his mother, and so I think like the relationship is starting to like make a little bit more sense now. And we'll see where it goes from here. But then we go back to this, and then this is a moment where Regina is like, okay, I guess I'll bite. Give me if I get like 500K, then maybe I can do as you please. She's like, what now, Daddy? So she's basically saying that in the same kind of accent that that Claudia had, right?
What now, Daddy Lou?
Which is interesting because she just read the book in between last meeting with Louis, I imagine, and like I guess it was described in the book that it was like a southern accent or something, but I guess that's what she did here. So I guess it kind of makes sense because she never wouldn't have possibly heard how she sounds like. But anyways, so does she feel like this is going to be like a sugar daddy situation? Of course, if she read the book and as she's going to get to know Louis, she probably understands that it's not quite sugar daddy relationship. It's more like it's become more like it's a weird thing. It's a vampire fledgling thing, It's similar, how it's weird with Lestat and Gabriella, but in this it's weird in a different way. It's like a daughter sister relationship, really. And out of the two fledgling relationships, it seems to be healthier than Gabriella and Lestat versus Louis and Claudia. Seems to be the better one. And Louis and Claudia seems to be the better relationship. And so he's going to try to relive that. And like, where's that going to lead to? Like, is this going to end up feeling just as like an excuse to keep these characters and these actors around, for this season? It's almost over now. We're past the halfway point. I imagine it's going to be a big part in future seasons. But like, is this going to be, is it going to work, with the rest of the story to have her around? This could be kind of like this season's arc for Louis of like trying to let go of Claudia and then realizing, once he spends some time with Regina beyond the diner, like he's gonna realize that he can't quite get that back, and he has to accept the fact that Claudia's gone after all these decades now, century maybe now. And so that's his learning process here. And by the end of the season or next season, he'll break it off, and then we'll see Claudia's ghost appear or something. I don't know. Because I was suspecting we would see Claudia's ghost because we knew that the actress here, Delaney is her name, I think. She did press and stuff, so she would be back in the series. And so is it just these moments here as Regina, or are we going to see, we kind of do see a little bit of the ghost here in this upcoming scene of Claudia, more of a muse imagination from Lestat here. But anyways, we'll see where that ends up. I'm a little bit skeptical about that storyline, you know, because also I feel like is this gonna subvert the whole stalking storyline of the guy stalking somebody because they remind them of somebody? You know, is that going to be subverted here? Or is it going to become a little bit too trite and cliche by the end? I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But here we get a little bit of manifesto. And so he basically, he's kind of like, you know, there's a little bit of similarities, this manifesto, to like a left-wing activist, perhaps, almost like, or a little bit of a workers' rights, you know, the idea that like maybe a little more closer to consumer rights maybe, but the idea that like the vampires are feeding off the fans, right, you know, and like he's saying how like if we are their fuel, we also have power, you know. And so what exactly are this guy's aims? It kind of cuts off there. We don't exactly hear the rest of it. He says, but if we are their fuel, are we not also their strength? So is he trying to rally people against the vampires at this point? Like, hey, like, you know, they can't just keep feeding off us without some compensation, without some equality here. Perhaps he wants to transition to this new vampire world with some demands, you know, from the vampires, like, hey, like, you know, you're cool and all, we can offer you some blood voluntarily, you know, so, but we're not gonna, you know, be at your women call and like just sacrifice ourselves for you. We're not going to be exploited by you, you know, kind of maybe connecting it to the idea of just like how the people, the workers, create the value for the capitalist / vampires who siphon off their labor, you know, their value. So like kind of equating it to that idea, you know, I don't know, like it would be cool to see the rest of his little video. Perhaps we'll see more of it coming up here when the big conversion happens. But that's interesting. That's an interesting little take there. But that seems to have ended the tour. At least everyone quit because they're scared of killer fans out on the loose. The lawyer almost got killed. But looks like Lestat's by himself on the van. And once again, he's all alone. You know, remembering the time when he was alone once again alone when his mother left him after having dinner at the beach from the shipwreck here, and we see, you know, it's fun. They use the turned over boats as coffins. We see a necklace here with an emerald gem there. Not sure if there's a particular significance to that. Perhaps an Easter egg for book readers. I don't know. But we do have a lock of hair here, which is interesting. Could be she cut some of her hair as a souvenir, as a little remembrance for her son. But this might be the first time she leaves her son, and now we've come to know that Gabriella does this a lot, right? She leaves and without notice a lot and just comes back when she feels like it. Sometimes leaves for centuries, or a century. And the interesting thing, of course, is the cutting of the hair here. So in the books, I've read, from what I've read, I know there's a passage where she cuts her hair, and then it grows back. Like the next morning, it grows back immediately almost. And so I don't know how the adaptation is going to work here, because I don't know if we've got into the lore of hair growth and for vampires in the show yet. I don't think so. So are they going to keep with that? You know, and so basically, like in the book, she would cut her hair. She would have to cut her hair every day, I guess, because it would grow back. And that was part of her way to kind of kind of appear more masculine in the books. And maybe this is indicating that that's where this is going. Like soon after this, does she cut her hair so she can blend in as male, particularly in this time period to to get more of that male privilege. So perhaps could be that, and if so, she then maybe decides in the future that she's fine with just presenting as female. I don't know. I'm curious to see where they go with that, and it is a bit of a shame that they wouldn't if they don't explore, the gender fluidity of vampires, in this season. This just show that's embracing the queerness more so than the book. So I'm curious to see if they end up doing more of that with that or not. But that could be something that's indicated here. We'll see. But then she comes back, and of course Lestat's a bit upset. It's like, get out of here, leave the bus driver alone. But Gabriella comes, and wait, she's talking in Italian here.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyways, but she's basically saying like, hey, like, cheer up, son, sire. You can lead these vampires. You people love you now. It's almost like she didn't quite believe in her son in the beginning, and now that he's gotten so popular, she's come back. I wonder if Lestat will resent her for that at this point. It's like, oh, now you come back. But in his most vulnerable moment here, really, when his everyone's left him, she's come to persuade him to, like, hey, like, actually keep going, keep singing, and use your platform to lead this vampire conversion. I feel like that's what she wants. Of course, she mentioned ruling over everyone as devils, back in the beach scene. So this is a continuation of that, and in vampire years, it's really like not that much time has passed, really. And so it's like still part of her plan. Like, hey, let's take over the world, and you can be the leader. You can, she's like, perhaps feels like she can be, the queen regent of her son's leadership as the king or something, situation of the vampires. Maybe that's, she wants to be in that position of power, right? She feels like she can influence her son so that, and she can, rule alongside him in a way. So I think they're definitely positioning Gabriella to perhaps be the villain of this season. I feel like the main bad. I mean, in a sense, the villain against the humans, and also villain against Lestat. Because I think we're learning here that, like, Lestat is falling into another toxic relationship. We've had this relationship. He's had this relationship with Nikki, with Verban, with Louis, and now in this season, he's going through that again once again with his mother. So, and of course, we see the ghosts of his past here: Nikki, his younger self, Louis, and Claudia there. And he actually recites, he's narrating this again. We're listening in on the Failures album that he released, right, on the auction, and he's narrating here. He's saying that, like, oh, like, she was very convincing, my mother, and it was hard to say no, and like, it's in a way like he's acknowledging that, like, it was a mistake to listen to his mother at this point, but he couldn't resist. He compares it to how Louis described how Lestat persuaded him to join the dark side, become a vampire and all that, in the first episode. Because in the first episode, remember, Louis says these words. Is it going to show up here? I might be going too fast. An excellent time to end
Excellent.
But yeah, he's paraphrasing, but he says caught in a similar situation where Lestat was, when he turned Louis in the church, I believe, and Louis was at his lowest moment, you know. He had just confessed to the priest, you know, and I think he was suicidal too, and then Lestat came to save him. It's like, no, you can do better. You can ascend beyond this moment, and you can be a vampire, and you could, you know, be the ruler of the night with me, you know. And now Gabrielle is in the role of Lestat, and Lestat is in the role of Louis, and her argument. Yeah, there's this particular line that was good. That maybe we can look into. I don't want to like show the. I have to make sure I don't show too much for the copyright. But you get the idea. But yeah, so that's what I can't find the exact line there, but that's where we end off in this episode, and we cut to them in the studio. So, and that's her watching the studio as well. It ends right there. And it cuts to, that's where the credits come in. But so I suppose the tour has ended, and even though next episode's called New York, this is probably, maybe they go to New York to record the album, and so this is the moment where I guess inspiration strikes, you know, via Gabriella here and via the whole assassination attempt, sort of. And they all get back together and start recording their next album. So that's what we're going to see next time, I imagine. I don't really want to get into the next Dawn previews because I prefer not to look at those. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, this episode, I did enjoy this episode. I've been liking most all these episodes so far. And they all kind of have a similar rhythm to them, you know. But they all seem to have they all seem distinct too, you know. It's kind of like a stream of consciousness telling of this Vampire Lestat story. But it's very fitting, the chaotic nature of it all, the pacing of it, to the aesthetic and style of a rock star life. Some of the interjections with Luke, cutting back to Louis, kind of, you know, slow things down a bit, and maybe things could have been shot differently. I don't know. Again, we'll have to see by the end of the season how it all adds up together. But I think, you know, I think the Armand stuff is working better, though. The Armand and Daniel stuff is working better to fit in with the narrative than the Louis stuff. The Louis stuff feels like, you know, it was just like tacked on. And I get, you know, narratively, structurally, it's like he's away from everybody else, you know. He's doing his thing with Claudia, with Regina, while Armand and Daniel are still connected to the whole music tour thing. So I guess that's why it kind of just works better naturally. But yeah, another good episode. Just in general, the writing is really good in general. Really pulls through. And we'll see where it heads into, if we're going to see the great conversion or not this season, if it's going to end prematurely or not. Like I'm a bit concerned that perhaps it will end right before a major climactic moment, and then we have to wait a whole 2 years. We'll see. I don't know, because I suspect at this point we're like past halfway. There's 3 episodes left. I suspect we won't see Akasha to the last episode. Akasha, of course, is the Queen of the Damned. We know that she's gonna be. We know that the actress has been cast. So either in a flashback, we might see them. But I feel like we'll probably see them in the present. I feel like next season will be Queen of the Damned based on the book, and that's where we'll see the history of Akasha. It kind of would fit within the style and the pattern of the show of like starting off with like modern version, and then we go back to the past of a character. Like the introduction is always like modern typically. That's the show started with Louis in Dubai. Although Lestat was always showing the past, and but then but you know what I mean, like this season starts with Lestat as a rock star, and then we go back. So that's what's probably gonna happen with the Queen of the Damned season. But yeah, I'm still excited, on board with this whole show, and am eagerly anticipating next week. Until then, I'll be here under the moonlight. Let me know what you think. What are your thoughts? I'll see you next time. Bye bye.